the Torontos and the Vancouvers, and that's frankly by design. Yes, there's a few very large cities here in Canada, but the vast majority are not super large, but yet very innovative. And I don't know if it's in need, maybe that's the wrong word, but looking for ways to differentiate themselves and to find their place in the Canadian market as it's changing so fast. So for the next hour or so, we're going to have a conversation. We have a few questions, but we certainly want to invite you to participate and ask your questions as well. So as we have our conversation, I will look for raised hands, and we'd like to invite you to be part of this dialogue. So I'm going to just ask our guests, and I'll start here and there, and then I'll start with Barry back, if they can briefly introduce who they're with, what their role is, and then we'll start it off with some questions. So I have here on my immediate left, Dan Matheson, then we have Maria McChesney, I apologize, and then Barry, and it's another last name.
Verbanovich.
Yeah, Verbanovich. And I know, I can make fun of people's last names because people do that of my last name all the time. So Barry, if we go back, if you could say which municipality you're with and what hats do you wear?
Sure. So I'm a councillor in the city of Kitchener. I have been since 1994. Before that was actually on staff at the city of Kitchener in the IT department. Most recently, I was also the president, so presently the past president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities.
Thanks.
And I'm Maria McChesney, and this is on.
You take this.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I'm Maria McChesney, and I'm the Chief Information Officer with the City of Hamilton. I've been with the City of Hamilton now 4.5 years. Prior to joining the City of Hamilton, I was with the private sector. I was with the steel company in Hamilton, Stelco, for about 20 years. And then I went to a consulting company called Create Tech that provided asset management solutions. I was there for about 4 months. So at the City of Hamilton, we have many challenges, and as we have the panel discussion, you'll hear some of that and some of the things we're doing to overcome those challenges.
Hi, I'm Dan Matheson. I'm the mayor of the city of Stratford. I was first elected in 1994, similar to Barry. Served 2 terms as deputy mayor from 97 until 2003, and been the mayor since 2003. Stratford is a small community of 32,000 people, a good mix of urban and rural across our county. Stratford is in the process of reinventing ourselves because of the decline in manufacturing across our region, and we have been voted by the Intelligent Community Forum based in New York as one of the top 7 communities in the world for the last 2 years with regards to connectivity, broadband economy, and social and economic development. Been involved across the area as the chair of the Southwest Economic Alliance, which is the 2.3 million people represented from Windsor in the south to just past Guelph in the east, Owen Sound in the north, and Simcoe in the south. And that really represents a very vast geographic area. Large cities like London, Windsor, Kitchener-Waterloo throughout the area, and then smaller communities like Stratford and on into towns and villages, where it is probably the largest rural agricultural sector of this country.
Great, thanks. This doesn't work. Can you hear me still if I speak like this? Yeah. So just kind of a first question. We talked this morning about smart connected communities and intelligent communities, and Dan just mentioned he's been named, or his community has been named one of the top 7 intelligent communities in the world. Could you kind of explain what being an intelligent community means and what were the drivers for you to really pursue this?
Well, the 5 criteria, key criteria that the ICF uses is broadband connectivity, social inclusiveness, economic and social development plans for the future, the marketing and advocacy that you do with regards to that work, and then of course how it all relates. In this past year, the theme was innovation. Stratford in 1997 struck a strategic plan called 2010 and Beyond. And 2010 and Beyond called for Stratford to be a community of excellence with worldwide impact, and that we needed to embrace the ICT economy that was permeating through Waterloo region. To do so, we signed an agreement with the University of Waterloo to bring their digital media campus, a new campus, to the city of Stratford. Along the way, we actually laid fiber throughout our community. We have a 70-kilometer fiber loop overlaid with a 300 access point Motorola 802.11n mesh network. We have complete ubiquitous coverage over our entire community. With that, we decided to adopt a living lab concept, where we bring the brightest companies from around the world to bring their technology to bear to increase the quality of life of our residents, but also to help us prove out the technology, giving us a real leg up in the world stage. We've been very active in recruiting business to the community. The Royal Bank of Canada, the largest bank in this country, built their latest $400 million, 400,000 square foot data center in Stratford, which is a real eye-opener to the technology world, who thought in the past that small, rural, urban communities weren't going to play in the future economy. And what we're doing is showing that size doesn't matter, connectivity is what's going to drive the economy, and the ability of people to adapt to change within it is what's going to make a difference.
So when, so you had some of these drivers, and then obviously you brought in the university, and I just want to ask you, Maria, about some of your drivers or concerns or issues that you see in Hamilton that are kind of triggering you to look at innovation, to reinvent yourself.
So I'll make a couple of comments with respect to that. First of all, Hamilton is somewhat like Stratford, except I'll say we're trying to transform ourselves. We have an image of being a manufacturing city, predominantly around steel. That's certainly still a vibrant industry within the community, but not a growing industry. Our municipality is growing more around services. So we have large education community in Hamilton with McMaster University, Mohawk College, Redeemer College, Columbia College. We have quite a large population graduating from those educational institutions. As well, we're huge, growing big in the arts community and in the services community. Services being anywhere from medical services to IT services, but that's where the growth is. When I look at the city of Hamilton and I see some of the graduates that come out of McMaster University or Mohawk College, our objective is to keep them within the city of Hamilton, as opposed to have them leave the city of Hamilton and take that talent elsewhere. And we've been successful at doing that. If you look at the number of small businesses starting up in Hamilton, they're generally graduates from the college or from the university that have decided to start up in Hamilton. What we're looking to do is make it a place where they want to continue their growth, whether it's their careers or their families. So we're looking to make the city of Hamilton a place where you want to raise your kids, and there's opportunity for innovation. And as part of that, the technology is a key component of it. Because most of these students graduating from college, they lived and breathed the technology era. If you have children, most of your children are living off their telephones, whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, or Googling. So we have to provide that same infrastructure for them. So much like Stratford, the network is a key component. We've got fiber across the entire city. We'd like to expand that fiber across the city, but we also need to get more proactive at expanding the wireless connections across the city, because that's something else that most people looking to go anywhere today are looking for, that seamless wireless connection.
So both of you talked about having a university or an affiliation of a university, which obviously in the Kitchener-Waterloo area, well, I don't want to say dominated, but you have a big one. So how important has having a big university home to Kitchener-Waterloo area for the development and the innovation of your community, Barry?
Well, that's actually been an integral part of the kinds of success I think we've seen in Waterloo Region. Unlike Hamilton, which was amalgamated in 2000, Waterloo Region's communities were kept in a two-tier structure. But when I talk about a lot of what's happening in the area, it's happening in the context of the regional development as a whole. And in fact, our external economic development is done at a regional level. Certainly the universities have been a big part of it, as is the community college. University of Waterloo, Wilfrid Laurier University, and Conestoga College have been a big part of the success in our region. With the University of Waterloo, I don't need to tell, I think most of the people in this room, there have been significant economic spin-offs of tech companies that have resulted from students who have been through the university, academics that are working at the university who come up with ideas and bring them to fruition. In fact, Waterloo Region has 3 times the Canadian per capita number of patents that are actually issued, bigger than anywhere else in Canada. The universities have, both universities are in the city of Waterloo, although the city of Kitchener back about in 2004 rather, implemented a economic development investment plan which focused on attracting both universities into downtown Kitchener as well. So University of Waterloo came downtown Kitchener with a school of pharmacy done in partnership with U of T, as well as a med school that was done in partnership with McMaster University. And Wilfrid Laurier University brought down their School of Social Work to downtown Kitchener.
One of the things I was going to add, and Maria's absolutely right, in southwestern Ontario we're seeing an outward migration of jobs because of manufacturing losses. The ability to keep young minds within the community is a challenge at the forefront. Stratford, as an example, has our population is above the provincial average, so we have an older population. Our growth rate is below the provincial average, so we're not growing it enough. So we've done similar things to Hamilton, creating an industrial park where it's completely wired. We've created an incubation center similar to what Waterloo has done. We've created that opportunity through an angel investment fund to try to get these young minds to stay within our community. There's a study by the Ontario Literacy Coalition called Menial No More, and it calls for by 2020 every job in the economy will need some level of technology training to actually be able to complete it. Whether it's a waitress inputting orders, whether it's a mechanic understanding how to program a car, all of those things are going to be the challenge. And we've tried to actually adapt to that so that we will be at the forefront of Menial No More and making sure that our workers are all skilled workers or knowledge workers, no matter what segment of the economy they're in.
I just keep looking at the audience, otherwise we keep on going here. Maybe very quick question. You're also having the past president hat on for FCM, and this morning we talked about FCM being one of our partners through which we try to advocate and share the message of connectivity and smart connected communities. Some of the issues you heard here, and including with Kitchener, can you kind of give some flavor of what's happening in Canada-wide as to challenges? Because not every community probably has a university, for instance, as a pillar in its community, right?
Sure. I think it's fair to say that communities across Canada are grappling with technological issues to varying degrees. Obviously, our urban centers are the most successful, and when you start looking at places like Montreal, Vancouver, Toronto, they're the places where people that first come to mind for people in terms of investment. But the reality is, other communities across the country, as my two counterparts have indicated, are really stepping up, and people are recognizing that really these communities are the hubs of where activity is taking place and where the new economy is growing from. Certainly throughout Southern Ontario, the change and move away from the manufacturing sector, or the traditional manufacturing sector, has forced all of us to look at these things, and has forced municipalities to look at the new economy and how do we engage in that. Cisco has certainly been a great partner with FCM, and one that in a relationship that's growing going forward, in the sense that our communities are looking at how do they use technology, to better create environments that will attract new businesses to their communities, but also looking at technology from the perspective of how does it enhance the quality of life of their residents. As we get to parts of rural and northern Canada, obviously connectivity continues to be an issue, and that's something that CATA and other organizations have played a leading role in terms of advocating to make sure that those investments are being made. And in fact, even now, as we start talking about a new long-term infrastructure plan that the federal government has committed to, there has been some talk, should that infrastructure just look at traditional infrastructure like roads and sewers and so on, or should it also look at things like wireless and broadband connectivity in parts of the country where it doesn't exist now as an economic driver for economic growth in the future? And you know, whether that's a direction ultimately that gets agreed upon, I don't know yet, but certainly it's being put on the table as something that needs to be considered.
I just wanted to add to some of the comments that were just made, specifically around the broadband connectivity. Even for the city of Hamilton, that has been a real challenge, because since amalgamation, we do have a lot of rural areas that don't have the infrastructure for the wireless connectivity. And so one of the things we're doing is we're working with private sector organizations to help them understand why that need is there and why we would want to work with them to make sure they can extend that connectivity to some of those rural communities, so those families can also get access, because the kids need the access. Most of the schools are driving that down to the kids. And we're working with private sector to see how they can make that service available in an affordable manner to a lot of the families in those rural communities.
That's a great point. And when we hear new communities in other countries, but even here at the waterfront, for instance, the buzzword is fiber to the home, right? A gig or even 10 gig. And the point you're making is not only it's not affordable, but just the infrastructure development wouldn't be in play. And Dan, when we met first time, you were saying, you made a comment about good is good enough, I guess, is fiber. It doesn't need to be fiber because people may not be using it anyways.
Well, I think what happens is we've looked at fiber to the home. Economically, it doesn't pay itself out right now to take it to every door. What it needs to be, though, is connectivity. We need to get people on the information highway, drawing information through it. When there's the value proposition that's gained over time, when people understand the wealth of information that's there and they see how they can use it, they'll either help drive the ROI on it because they'll put a higher value on it, which will make it more of a priority. You'll see a higher usage rate, which will bring the private sector partners to bear, where they'll then see the opportunity to make money on it and bring it into play. And three, you'll actually then start to see people understand from a future point of view why it's important for the development of a community. What we've done in Stratford is we started our own data fiber company. We own our own Wi-Fi network. We own our own fiber network. Now we allow carriers onto it, but we're actually not allowing them to put walls up around our residents. We're allowing the visitors to come to our community, to be able to jump on that highway and get the information they need. And until such time as we believe the private sector will match the ubiquitous coverage and make it uniform to all residents, then we're going to continue to play our role. And we'll drive usage up, which will help put the business plan in place.
Mary?
Yeah, I have a question. It sounds like you've done a very good job with the connected part of it. You all have infrastructure in place, and you're encouraging citizens within your city, in your urban places, to actually begin to use the network to innovate. Is there an example you can give me of what city government is doing that is smart?
I could give you one. So for example, if you put a concept in your mind that you're going to be a wired city or a city of tomorrow, you have to put that lens on for every decision. In 2010, our election in Stratford was completely online. There were no paper ballots whatsoever. So we walked the walk. Our smart meter program is completely run off of Wi-Fi network. So when the Ontario government said you could do it, it could be 700 megahertz radio. It could be cellular chip, which is today's technology, or Wi-Fi, which is really tomorrow. We're looking at Cisco's telepresence to meet the Ontarians with Disabilities Assessment Act, where we need to be able to allow people with disabilities. We're looking at telepresence within accessible buildings within our community, where they can get to any department to do business with our government without actually having to get into the 1898 City Hall that's really not a great place and welcoming for Ontarians with disabilities. So we're trying to use technology to bridge that gap. Those are just some of the ways we're looking at everything from e-portals, streaming of video of council meetings, online blogging with regards to council people. Those are all concepts. The last one I'd say that we're actually using through a partnership with RIM is smart meters. Now have to have smart thermostats in homes. We're actually doing a pilot right now with their playbooks, where actually you can do energy management throughout your home, so your thermostat, anywhere in the community on the Wi-Fi network. We've now got light bulbs from Toshiba that all are IP addressable, and people can control the lighting within their home off of that playbook. So we're trying to take it into everyday life. Our energy conservation goals of our hydro company, which we own, are being met. We're getting people to understand technology. The university is running digital literacy programs for youth, seniors, and adults, and we're really trying to take it to a next level. And we're trying to implement where strategic, like telepresence and online voting, as a way to show government's heading in that direction as well.
So I just wanted to add to what Dan was saying. A lot of those things are also true for the city of Hamilton. I think the other thing that we have done is made sure that at any public facility, a Hamilton Public Library, a rec center, there's accessibility to the citizens that might not be able to get access to a laptop or a playbook. There's machines in there. They can go in there, they can sit at a machine, they have wireless connectivity, they have access to all the social networking sites. We don't block anything, but we also make that stuff available through our community centers, because some people can't afford the device. And so we make it available through our libraries or any public facility as part of a means to give them access to those services.
Are there any projects that would have a sustainability goal in Hamilton?
Sustainability
Well, I'm thinking of environmental sustainability.
So yes, I'll make a couple of comments with respect to environmental sustainability. I don't think there's a report that I take to council that doesn't speak to the environmental advantages of implementing. So for example, implementing printers across the city of Hamilton. That brought back to council a number of metrics, environmental metrics, whether it's carbon footprint, whether it's saving trees through the reduction of use of paper. So implementing printers is not about printing, it's also about how do we maybe reduce our need to print the paper, or if we do need to print it, how do we print more efficiently, print on both sides. Ask the question if you need to print the color. So those types of things were metrics that when we reported back to council, we were able to show them what we saved in energy, carbon footprint, paper costs, and we related those in terms of saving trees. So if you see a dashboard at the City of Hamilton, you'll see how many more trees are in Gage Park as a result of implementing some of the environmental factors around the technology.
I think maybe just to add very briefly, much of what my colleagues have said is true in Waterloo Region as well. Certainly one of the big programs was the accessibility to computer workstations and wireless connectivity in many of our buildings. I know in Waterloo, their public buildings have been on board for the past number of months with wireless connectivity. In Kitchener, ours will be fully wireless by the end of the year in terms of arenas, community centers, all those kinds of facilities. The access to workstations originally came into place across the country through a federal funding program that recently actually just was brought to an end, and that is creating challenges for municipalities in terms of how that's going to be funded going forward, whether it's going to be downloaded onto the local municipalities, will there be other community partners that are going to come on board. But as we speak of wiring our nation, as we speak of engaging our citizens more, those kinds of steps are integral to keep moving the agenda forward. And I mean, in my view, that particular one was a step backwards in terms of the kinds of cuts that happen federally.
One of the challenges, our school boards picked up the challenge as well. We have the first online high school where you can go start grade 9 all the way through to grade 12 with the Abbott-Maitland District School Board called AMDEC. And you can actually take a high school diploma in our area completely online. We've pushed that out. We're seeing the Canadian military have some people use it. Somebody by the name of Justin Bieber, who is a Stratford phenomena, who has actually completed some of his high school courses, and he'll graduate later this week from St. Michael High School in Stratford. He's benefited from those types of things. So we're seeing that the whole piece, whether it's school boards, right through to government, through to private business, fostering this type of innovative way of thinking.
Jim?
Jim Harris, Backbone Magazine. What have you changed in your municipal practices that enable the digital world and add value and cut costs? For example, my father-in-law is in hospital. He had x-rays at one hospital. He's in another one that's an hour and a half away. They will not digitally send his digital photos, so my brother-in-law yesterday had to drive an hour and a half, pick it up, drive an hour and a half back. So I don't know whether it's a security concern or something that prevents the hospital system from changing. So what are you doing to drive out paperwork within your municipalities and move to more digital? And then the second part of this question, what are the barriers that you're encountering?
Well, I think if I can jump in first, certainly corporately, we're trying to automate as much as we can, and most recently, we just actually put together all of our operations facilities into one central consolidated facility, which is operationally saving dollars. But at the same time, we've also we've actually conveniently switched to a Cisco solution on that in terms of our telephony in the building, and that's going to now link to all of our other facilities around the community. We're using existing fiber that exists within the community, which is again saving dollars for taxpayers because we're able to use that now to do all our connections going forward. So that's the kind of stuff that's happening. We're starting to look more and more towards mobile solutions, so that when we have our building inspectors, our fire inspectors, our bylaw enforcement officers, all those people out in the field, we're starting to look at the kinds of solutions that will allow them to actually do their work wirelessly from the field and help ensure that we're getting the biggest value for the buck, and secondly, that we're improving customer service as much as possible. One of the other things that's been a big bugaboo with residents for a long time has been the whole, we have a very strong network of neighborhood associations that run programming in all our community centers. And all of that registration has been done manually. We're just in the process of automating all of that so that folks will either be able to do it at home or come into one of the workstations available in our city facilities to do it. I think one of the challenges that you get at in terms of sharing information, and I don't know if that's true in this particular instance that you talked about, but certainly the whole sharing of data and privacy legislation is probably at times can be the biggest stumbling block to some of this technology and ensuring that we can help people in the most effective way possible.
So there's a couple of comments I want to make with respect to what I'll call other public sector organizations, whether it's hospitals or universities or school boards. A lot of it is public funding. So there's a couple of things we've done at the City of Hamilton. I know when we were procuring our servers, our desktops, our storage, we collaborated with both McMaster University and Mohawk College on that whole procurement process. And we saw from that significant discounts from the vendors because we collaborated based on volume. And so that brought certainly some benefits to the citizens because at the end of the day, it's public sector, the money. There were some challenges in doing that because we all have our own requirements, especially when you get into the education sector where they're servicing students. They can't impose a lot of standards on students, and they generally can't impose a lot of standards on their researchers. So, but even with those challenges, we were able to develop a process where we've got at least the 3 tier 1 vendors, the HP, the IBM, the Dells, to come back with a proposal with some significant savings. So that's something you can do within the community. We also have public health that reports into the City of Hamilton, and we've done some work with our emergency management services. So our ambulances, we've done work with the ambulances so that when they come to a home to pick up somebody that's ill, they have their playbooks where they may be able to connect over to the hospital system to say this patient's coming in, here's some of the vital signs on the patient, make sure there's a bed available if the patient is critical. So we're trying to do some integration. Now, I'm going to tell you with the hospital, we have had challenges with integrating. And it's because a lot of the privacy around the data, right? That's part of it. Some of it is intellectual capital as it relates to the physicians. But we were able to put a thin client in the hospital so an ambulance attendant, when they get there, can say, we're here. Even to monitor wait times, to see how long the ambulance is sitting waiting before the patient's admitted into the hospital. That was information that our EMS people could use with the province to say, hey, here's our challenges. The bottleneck is not necessarily the ambulances, it's the wait time in the hospitals. So those are just some examples of where we've tried to work with some other public sector organizations to integrate technology and information.
And similar to Barrie, we've got mobile worker platforms going across all their departments. We have actually right now piloting a program called the Mutual Link Interoperability. And in September, Stratford will be the first community in Ontario to actually do this, and we're hosting the Canadian Interoperability Technology Group for a conference. Our police, fire, ambulance, hospitals, schools will all be connected. And whether it's me on my cell phone, you on your 900 megahertz radio, and somebody else on their personal channel with the police, can all be linked together into one mobile unit. So it's emergency management services. It allows things like Maria's described with regards to ambulances on their way in, trying to get a doctor headed to emerge, get him on a cell phone where they can talk about vital signs, how it's going to help. And for us, it's that operability, it's that living lab. Mutual Link wants to prove out that this system works and that communities should be just looking at it. Technology and law enforcement groups want to start to prove that they can cooperate together because there's always been silos around their information and data that they have, and it's been tough. More specifically on Jim's question, in Stratford, over 80% of the doctors are all using the city's fiber. We've connected them to the hospital and the family health teams. Today, if I'm in my doctor's office, my records can be sent wirelessly and of course through the firewall to the hospital. If there's an x-ray been read, it can actually send back to the doctor's office that data. We've worked around that with the Stratford General Hospital and the Huron Perth Healthcare Alliance. And lastly, to give you a thought of innovation, small communities trying to find physicians for the future, recruitment is always a challenge. We've told our radiologists they don't have to work on weekends. We actually have that contracted out. An x-ray is taken in Stratford, shipped to Durham, Ontario, or Durham region. It's read there over the weekend, results are shipped back. We've actually been able to increase the quality of life of our doctors, being able to provide primary, high-end care to our residents, and we've dealt with it, what would normally be a physician recruitment challenge, by the use of technology, adopting and adapting to it. So it's helped us recruit better doctors.
One thing I just want to quickly jump in on is this whole issue of the interoperability, because that's been a big issue over the last little while for our emergency service providers and for FCM. And it had to do with the sale of the 700 megahertz spectrum. You'll know that the federal government has committed to 10 megahertz of that to emergency service providers across the country. It's half of what they're looking for. The advocacy on that is continuing going forward. But there's a real movement across emergency service providers across the country to see that happen, because number one, it's in the long run it will save dollars, but more importantly it will save lives, because right now our emergency service providers in many instances can't talk to each other, and they're working on spectrums that don't have the same level of capability in terms of the communication traveling wirelessly, and therefore they're looking to see that 700 megahertz spectrum be brought into fruition, much like they've seen some commitments in the States amongst emergency providers down there.
Hello, I'm Dimitris Tomadakis from Infocom Magazine, Greece. You keep saying playbook instead of tablet. Is it because all of these technologies could be compatible with BlackBerry OS only, or is it just because you're trying to support
in Canada, you can only say playbook.
Truly, it's tablet. It's tablet, but we use playbook as an example. When you're dwarfed by RIM in the Waterloo region, you better be a supporter.
So just briefly build on something Jim asked, right, and breaking down barriers. And we talked this morning about kind of 5 levers to make smart connected community. One would be smarter regulations and the appetite or willingness to really change code or be very disruptive. And I think, Dan, you've been to some extent because you created your own network connectivity company. And I'm just wondering how that worked for you and if other communities go that way.
Sure. One of the challenges we had was getting traction. When we talked to Rogers or Bell Globe Media, they'd say, look, you're not on our radar right now. You're too small a market. So we had to go out and create our own market to drive the behavior that we expected from them. And when we did that, we created our own Wi-Fi network. All of a sudden, we got that interest level back up from Rogers and Bell, and we got the regional player in Whiteman Communications saying, hey, maybe we would like to talk to you about fiber to the home. One of the things I find is the technology legislation today is behind the times. Legislation in itself takes forever to get through government, and by the time they get to deal with the problem that was yesterday, we're already 2 generations ahead in technology, and they're not very proactive. If anything, I think the governments across all of them, and starting at municipal level too, we need to start looking at how we open source more things, how we start to be more adaptive quicker to technology. The privacy legislation that we talk about today is all based on paper records. It's not actually based on data. It's not based on data in a cloud. And we need to start adapting to that quicker because we're going to find that this evolution is changing so quickly. And that's where we forced the hand a little bit to do that, start our own company. We've got our own internet service providing company. I'm not sure it'll be in business forever. It'll just be in business long enough to make sure we get people's behavior to where we want it to be.
So I'm just going to make a couple of comments. Originally at the City of Hamilton, when we started to plan for fiber across the city, and we have, like, just the city buildings alone, I think we have 180 buildings to get fiber to. It was actually done by our utility company called Horizon Utilities, which was, at the time, owned by the city. But since that time, at that point we probably extended most of the fiber to a number of buildings, Horizon Utility decided to get out of the fiber business, and that ended up getting sold to what was Atria, and I think Atria has since been bought out by Rogers. So we've evolved from where Stratford is, where it was our fiber owned by the city, to getting out of that business and privatizing it through Rogers. The thing with doing that is there's more opportunity for Rogers to justify extension of fiber in some of these remote areas where they can attract business elsewhere than it would be for the City of Hamilton to get it there just because we have a physical location there. So we went from having our own to going to a privatized fiber. And the same will probably be true with wireless. We do have wireless nodes across the city. Some of that we've leveraged because police need wireless nodes because they've got remote cameras in certain high crime areas in order to feed that. But that's another area where I think we will be looking to move to more of a privatized environment for wireless.
And we were actually very much in the same situation. In fact, Atria started in Waterloo Region, eventually was privatized, and as you heard, has gone over to Rogers. And I think what that's speaking to is the recognition that governments in general can't just look at things the way they've historically been done, and that more and more in the Canadian public is their appetite for public-private kinds of partnerships or innovative approaches has increased significantly over the past decade. I mean, there's still some reticence there, and there's still a lot of lessons that need to be learned in the process. But there's a recognition, and even when we talk about, for example, the new long-term infrastructure plan nationally through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, we don't just talk about the role of the 3 orders of government. We also talk about the role that the private sector needs to have in this, and particularly, if we're going to see a role in terms of wireless or broadband, that's got to involve the private sector as part of the solution, quite frankly.
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering, just in general, how cities adopt technology in general. So you mentioned legislature. I imagine there would be maybe an RFP, call for RFP. There might be some meetings. I'm just wondering. I just want to better understand just how cities make those purchase decisions and the timeline as well.
Well, first you have to have a city that wants to look at technology. There's some that are, not 50 kilometers west of Stratford, they're 50 years west of Stratford. Where they haven't figured out that broadband connectivity is where it's going to be in the future. So in our mind, we look at everything in a technology lens. We have legislation or bylaws that require us to issue requests for proposals or tenders for amounts over $60,000 when it comes to selecting consultants or hardware. But we've started to look at partnerships per se, because we've developed a living lab. We're having companies come in and use our Wi-Fi network to prove their technology. Toshiba's doing it right now with their IP addressable lights. At the end of it, we know that we can buy the lights at a decreased amount, significantly more so than we could if we went to tender, and we're actually prepared to single source that. We'll do a report, we'll do a cost benefit analysis, we'll vote on it through a public transparent process, and we'll do it. And gone are the days when I think you can have a cookie cutter that says, okay, we're buying 52 widgets, because today technology is so different, and it depends on how you've kind of laid out your architecture, what you want to achieve with it, what your business process is, and I think that's where different communities need to adapt. You know, Maria's case, which is Hamilton, is very disparate with some rural and urban areas, large geographic sections between communities per se. It becomes tough to do that. In Stratford, which is a pretty tightly wrapped little community, we can do our architecture much differently, and our business processes would be significantly different. And then Barrie has it on mass and on scale. So it's all on how you lay it all out.
I'm just going to make a couple of comments. I think Dan's already commented on sort of the procurement process that we need to follow within the municipal sector, and it's pretty much the same for all of us. But one of the questions is, what is the driver that makes you look at some of these technologies? And I'm going to tell you that some of that comes from the citizens in our community. You know, it's citizens going to counselors and saying, you know, why don't you have this available through your website? Or why can't I connect wirelessly from this location to be able to do this? So some of the pressures are coming from the community, and we've got counselors that have an obligation to service the citizens of the community to ask those questions. So often when we're going in front of council, you know, I'm generally pretty prepared, and I know who some of the advocates are there within the community that are saying, hey, you know, you guys are doing this. Why are you doing it this way? Why aren't you going to open data? Why aren't you going to open source? So some of those questions are coming from the community, and they're good questions. And so as technology people providing that service, we've got to be in a position to answer those questions to the members of council that have an obligation to the members of the community that have voted them in.
In Waterloo Region, I mean, one of the strong advocates for change is an organization called Communitech. And they started out as really an industry-based group for all the tech companies in Waterloo Region, but now really they're much more than that. They are an enabling organization that really brings partners together, the education sector, NGOs, the private sector, governments, to really help move our community forward in terms of technology and change. And that's really been the driver behind a lot of the things that are happening, including you know, our focus in Kitchener now on digital media and the partnerships that have developed at the Communitech Hub in the Tannery building in Kitchener, and the relationships that are now happening between our two communities, Kitchener and Stratford, in that regard.
I just want to make a comment about the Communitech. I was recently invited out to Kitchener. I was there on Friday at the Tanner building, and I was really impressed to see how they had set up within the Tanner building through Communitech graduates from the university starting up their own companies. They had office space there, they had access to the technology, and they were being very innovative through that process. So just the way that Communitech has embraced the innovation coming out of the students from the university was just awesome for me to see.
Yeah, and it's not just, in fact, it's not just graduates from the universities, but it's some of the big technology players in Waterloo Region. So whether it's RIM or OpenText and others who you know, have a desk there, so people have ideas, they have folks from those companies that they can come to and learn from and exchange ideas and come up with new approaches on some of these issues.
Barry, you mentioned lessons learned. So when you're thinking as municipal leaders about innovation, who are your role models? And do you have some mechanism for sharing best practice that you've developed, maybe within the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, or is there another mechanism for sharing?
There is a mechanism for sharing through FCM, although that is an area of growth. Most of our mechanism for sharing at FCM has been in the areas of sustainability through our Green Municipal Fund. And that was a $550 million fund that was established back in the Chrétien days. It's an endowment that we manage, and we give loans and grants to municipalities every year for sustainability initiatives. And there's a whole component around sharing of best practices that goes with that. But more recently, and we just finished our new strategic plan as an organization, and one of the things, well, two things actually that relate to this whole topic that came up as I traveled across the country and listened to our members. And one was a desire for more best practice sharing nationally amongst like-sized municipalities, particularly once we get to the mid and smaller sized communities that would have the challenges of doing that on their own. So certainly that, I would say, has been a big piece of that.
So the other comment I will make is there is the Municipal Information Systems Association in Ontario, which most municipalities are members of. And I think through that association, there's a couple things. They definitely run a conference every year. I know this year's was hosted in Hamilton, and that's an opportunity to hear from some of the municipalities, small, medium, or large, on things that they've implemented so that we can leverage that knowledge. But the other thing that association has done recently is they've set up special interest groups relative to different topics. Could be open data, could be fiber, and they're coming together as municipalities to share that intellectual capital. And I think there's a lot more we can be doing through that association to leverage just the intellectual capital amongst our communities. And the point's well taken. There are smaller communities that maybe can't afford some of this, that they could leverage the knowledge of the larger communities or the mid-size, or even some of the stuff that City of Stratford has done. It's been awesome. That's stuff that any of us could leverage. I just think that association needs to evolve at the point where we're doing more around the special interests and leveraging that intellectual capital. It's certainly set up to do that.
So Stratford would be your role model?
For some things, absolutely. Yeah, but you know what I'll say? They probably didn't have some of the challenges that we have in a city that's been amalgamated, you know? So they had a lot of opportunities to take advantage of some of the things that maybe we didn't do well, right?
So in our case, what we did is, we didn't increase our conference budget. So we looked strategically. We used to send 6 people off to FCM. We had 3 votes. So we went, okay, there's an accountability issue here. We're sending 6 people to something, we have 3 people. So we send 3 people, we put an accountability factor, and you got to do a report. We take those 3 seats there. We now attend the Intelligent Community Forum Annual Conference in New York. We normally attend the Pacific Telecommunications Conference held somewhere in the Pacific Rim. We've now started to work with Cisco, Toshiba, and others who have these types of conferences, and we use the same amount of dollars across our complete conference budget, but we're actually achieving a much broader, greater depth of experience, and best practices are shared commonly throughout that. We've sat down with Cisco, and I'm going to put Rick on the spot, but we sat down and said, how can we kind of get out and share our information, but you'll get us access to the areas that we need. And that's where our sharing comes in with corporations, where Rick says, tell me what your problems are, and we're in the midst of signing an MOU with them, and they're going to get us the solutions to the problems we have, and in exchange we're going to agree to share our solutions with others. And it's trying to find a way to make it all work within limited resources.
2 more questions from the audience.
You mentioned smart metering.
Yes.
Smart metering means you must include the consumer,
Yes.
the energy consumer. How did you achieve that?
So every home in Stratford has a smart meter on the house. Okay, so so that happens. So then the next,
Was it by regulation, or how did you?
how do we do that? It's
achieve
mandated
that?
by the Ontario government that you have to do it.
Oh, I see.
So we decided that if we were going to do it, we were going to use the most advanced technology, which in our mind was Wi-Fi ubiquitous coverage over the entire city. In doing so, the next phase of that comes in from the Ontario Energy Board is time of use data. That I can look at that meter at any time starting this time next year and be able to know that I'm paying 48 cents a kilowatt hour and how much I'm using. That's where we went to the looks of a tablet, or RIM in this case, a playbook, to use their technology. Because in the Ontario Energy Board, they say you get $250 for a thermostat in that home to do time of use billing. Well, $250 will get you a complete 16 gig playbook or tablet with a lot more utility than just a thermostat. People will then be able to go on there on the internet, social media sites, we'll be able to do push communication to them, and all of a sudden when you have that lens, you're saying I have this problem with regards to smart meters, but when I think of it in technology, I have a communication issue for the city, I have digital literacy issues, I have social development issues, and you start to solve your whole problem across a broad platform. And that's the lens we're looking at our solutions in.
Chip, final question?
The question I had was around, this morning we learned that the highest paid teacher in South Korea makes $3 million a year teaching English. And the largest university in North America is Phoenix, which has 400,000 students because it's all online. So the question is, have you done any economic modeling how embracing these services could be a major economic gain for Stratford if, and plus you have Justin Bieber to help you market it. But, you know, take your high school diploma here from Stratford, you could be teaching high school curriculum presumably everywhere in Ontario to remote communities and gaining students and some revenue model and growing the GDP of Stratford. Have you done any economic modeling of what you could suck into your communities because you're digitally wired?
Well, we've started to work on that. We've got a partner through a university, which we haven't announced the MOU we've signed, but they are going to use us as a test model with regards to connectivity in the digital economy on what it's going to mean. And they're actually going to have their School of Economics and Business study it. And that's one of the partnerships we had defined. Waterloo is a great digital media school. They don't have a business school. We've signed an agreement with the University of Western Ontario for their media studies and communications people. We've got another one with another university that are going to use their business people to look at that. So we are doing it. Limited resources, a budget of $92 million. We don't have the money to actually go and do that, but we found partners to do it. So they get the learning opportunity from it, and we get the data at the other end. Just to give you an idea, we do it now with the Stratford Festival, which is the largest classical theater in the world. It has 3,000 jobs, direct and indirect, generates $140 million of GDP for the community, and is $65 million of taxation for all three levels of government. And that started in 1953 in a tent for $125. Gives you a concept. Scalability.
In terms of Waterloo region, and I figured this kind of question would come up, and so this is data that's been put together by Communitech. But in total revenue has grown from basically, you know, the low millions in 1997 to 18 billion in 2010 from the Waterloo region tech sector. We've gone from 50 tech firms in 1997 to more than 711 firms today. Over 200 tech startups, 631 patents granted per million, which is 3 times the national average. 28,000 new jobs have been created in tech firms since 1997. So it gives you a kind of sense of what the impact has been, and not only directly on the tech companies, but then everything else that spins off of that as well.
It's time, right? Yeah, it's time. With that, like a closing question, I could ask a closing question, and then knowing all you have lots of vision, and it's going to take too long. I'm just kidding. But you guys are going to stick around, I believe, right? So there's going to be more opportunity for some questions. I wanted to thank you for coming in for this. I know all 3 communities and municipalities are great partners of Cisco, and in all cases we're keen to do so much more, because I think Mary's your question was very right. It's one thing to have fiber and Wi-Fi and connectivity. It's now what we're going to do with it, and it's what we discussed this morning in terms of the value-added applications and services, and how do we create this platform of innovation. And we can do this with a community at a time, or together in a region, and then scale through a Federation of Canadian Municipalities, which we all certainly will do in the months and years to come. So thank you very much for joining. Please stick around for a little while. There's going to be lunch served, or it is already served, just outside. And we're going to reconvene at 2 o'clock. So we have a little bit of time for some conversation and lunch. So Thanks again to the panel. Thanks.